Do you know why you have these thoughts?
I don't know why, but whenever I close my eyes, I begin to question my sexuality.
And when did all this start?
Well, I was working on another video about subcultures. You know, staying up until 2 a.m. drinking energy drinks, listening to turbo folk, researching on Wikipedia, the whole creative process. But then I clicked one link, and he was just there, looking at me, eyes telling me it would be alright.
Do you think that your mother has something to do with this?
Why would she? Sigmund, what's with you and moms?
It is just standard procedure.
And I thought I had questionable thoughts. Yeah, I think this skit overstayed its welcome. We should get on with the episode so I don't have to try and keep my eyes open like in Clockwork Orange. Where is that title card anyway? Oh, this therapy session is right after mine? That is some good timing right there.
Excuse me. Our conference is over. I must go and take more opiates and heroin along with an amphetamine catheter. Guten Tag!
The story will continue after this.
Okay, skit aside, femboys are a group of young men who can convincingly dress like women. The current wave came about in 2019 and seems to be more prevalent than its historical counterparts. What historical counterparts, you may ask? Well, the femboy subculture is one of the newer ones on the list. It does, however, have a much more complex history leading up to it. One can't explain femboys without first explaining the concept of drag. Don't worry, I won't drag this point on. I'm just going to briefly cover it. And I will be touching on drag culture in one of the other, later groups. The art of men dressing feminine is something that's been around for a long part of human history. In a lot of the English folk custom of mummers' plays, men dress and act as female characters. It's very similar to the theater and ballet act known as travesti, which is where the roles were switched with men playing women and vice versa. And while it wasn't uncommon today for women to act on stage, there were rules of women not being allowed to act on stage up until the 1600s. In fact, the only times women travesti actors have been mentioned have been since Georgian and Victorian times. But this practice still continues in kabuki theater, with them banning women from doing so in the 1600s, and continuing to do yaro kabuki to this day. Turkey also had a form of femboy, called a koshek. They were male dancers, almost always the good-looking ones, who were dressed as women with vibrant clothing and heavy makeup. These koshekler were often seen at celebrations for the sultan and immediate family, usually with a band of musicians or in some cases a small orchestra to play for them while they performed. They were an integral part of harem culture, and as such, were sexually exploited. I can see some connections, minus the exploitation in most cases, as to why the popularity of femboy videos like this took off. Koshekler are enticing, and still around today in one form or another in Turkish media. I think that's enough drag for one day. Just kidding, cross-dressing goes both ways after all. Tomboys are the feminine equal to femboys, consisting chiefly of women and girls who dress and act more in a masculine sense. While they are a subculture on their own, I will briefly touch on them here. Tomboys themselves are seen a lot as no-nonsense and try to emulate their male counterparts in thought as well as fashion. Think every girl character in any 80s sports movie or Bokuko in a lot of animes. The tomboy usually, but not completely, is a lesbian and flips the gender role stereotype placed upon them by society by enveloping themselves in traditionally masculine activities and mannerisms. They even have a complimentary meme to femboy hooters: Tomboy Outback Steakhouse. And a lot of tomboy stuff we see in meme culture came about partially after the rise of femboy memes. Now that's enough build-up. I know what you all came here for. In a modern sense, femboys have become a subculture of the LGBT subculture, with a lot of gay and bi youths expressing their femininity by wearing dresses, stockings, or even maid outfits. Funnily enough, my CA did this one year, and no, I don't have a picture. The modern femboy is more likely to be active online than in person, mostly for the reasonable fear of public ridicule from a few unscrupulous individuals. There are communities that have popped up over social media sites like Reddit, Instagram, and the like, and before you go asking for links, I'd recommend doing your own research, because the moment I post a link or two somewhere, people are going to draw connections and ask for me to show off my thigh highs and nails. There's also the issue of I don't know who watches these videos, aside from the demographics, and I don't want to bring the next 4chan Tumblr war to some small femboy group. Or you all will shitpost and spam these communities while saying I brought you there, and that's some bad PR for any YouTuber. But while I can show you these communities, you may be wondering why they do that. The reasoning why one person, or even a group of people, do something varies. In one video I watched from a German YouTuber, who kinda does what I do, but with more specific individuals, the interviewee said he dressed femininely because that's how he felt more like himself. And that's an understandable reason some young men do it. They don't feel like young men. Either because of alienation from their idea of what men are, or the terrible toxicity that some people have about anything. It's kind of a cultural phenomenon I'll touch on later in the video. And by later, I mean right now. Because I wrote this part of the script last. This cultural phenomenon can be called by some who know little about it as turning our sons into girls, but they are not forced to dress themselves like that. They want to feel more like their true self. And if it means wearing a maid outfit or dressing in a miniskirt, programmer socks, and pastel crop tops, then let them. As long as they're not killing people or disturbing the peace like it's some knockoff of a lollipop chainsaw, it should be at least tolerated. It's a reason I came across a lot in my research. Feeling more like yourself, or feeling comfortable with yourself. A simple way to see this is they dress the way they do because they think it looks cute. And while cuteness is subjective, good on them for seeing beyond the lines of men's and women's clothing. They see the dresses, corsets, and thigh highs as appealing. It makes them feel good when wearing them, and they appreciate the compliments that come from their fashion choices. And if you've seen at least one of my other videos, then you'll know what's coming up next. Yep, me taking something simple and innocent and overanalyzing an aspect or two. This is a small bit of a stretch, but well researched, and I'm going to get a bit philosophical here. If you'd like to not listen to something that's been shoved down your throats by motivational speakers and the like, a time will appear on screen that you can skip ahead to. According to the teachings of Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, we adapt ourselves for a persona we show the world. This persona is far disjointed from our true self, fitting more in line with what the society and their role in it would be. This is countered in ourselves by us developing our true self. The true self, as told by Jung, is born with the individual. But through the development of the ego, the true self becomes hidden. But Jungian thought saw this could be cured, that one could return to their true self through individuation. Personal development towards authenticity is probably a better term for this, but as by psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz, the self must be wounded before the true self can begin to show. Kind of like breaking open a Kinder Egg. Except instead of finding a cheap plastic toy, there's your true self in there. And once the true self begins to show itself, self-acceptance and self-realization happen. Wherein the ego that exists around yourself, put around it by your development, begins to merge with the true you. Hell, it's a reason a lot of people pick up some hobbies to join subcultures like the ones I've mentioned. It makes them feel more like themselves. There's also the anima, the feminine subconscious, present in men. Another Jungian idea. In the way of expressing the anima, these femboys are seeking the self-honesty that maybe they are effeminate, and while not wholly undergoing surgery or anything they could deem drastic, they instead express themselves through dressing and acting the way they do. A lot of psychosexual and normal sexual development could play a factor into becoming a femboy as well, but since I'm not a psychology person, only a cultural guy who likes Jungian thought, I'll direct you to two figures and where they could possibly relate to femboys. Sigmund Freud, mentor to Carl Jung and the mind behind psychosexual development. One could see femboys through a psychosexual lens as they have mentally erased themselves from Freud's Oedipus complex and thus become more feminine than their counterparts who haven't. Alfred Kinsey, he's a bit controversial and I understand why, but he has helped with research of sexual behavior in 50s America. Some of his research into homosexuality and heterosexuality does hold that there are very effeminate men who are straight, and as well the research behind the Kinsey scale does hold some slight reasoning to relate it to femboys. But his research is greatly flawed, and I only bring him up here to justify having him on the title card. I'll just say again that if you're wanting a more scientific or psychological look into femboys, here are some starting points for your own independent research. Alright, philosophy and psychology lecture done. Welcome back to the video if you skipped to this timestamp. Bad news is you don't get to know how I justified having psychologists in my title card. The term femboy itself has been around since the late 90s. With the online presence of the term first being recorded in 2009. The term was also used by the LGBT community and some aspects of pop culture, but it really didn't explode in usage until the end of the 2010s. In 2019, it appeared on Instagram, iFunny, and other social platforms. The subreddit r/femboy memes was created in May of that year, and has amassed more than 7,500 members as of writing this.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for!
In October 2019, Twitter user Comfy Times tweeted the following: Hooters, but it's staffed entirely by femboys. Then the whole internet exploded with this meme. I think we're out of the life cycle of it now, but I'll leave a link to the Lessons in Meme Culture video if you want to learn more about it. Another meme, like this one, did gain some traction as well, but more for the I have two sides meme template. Now, I couldn't find much criticism of the subculture, aside from the more conservative, they're destroying the male identity stuff you'd expect from places like Fox or National Review. Nothing much is coming from across either side of the political aisle, which is expected considering it is self-expression. And with the not-so-subtle growth of femboydom every now and then, and with nobody stopping them, there may be more behind both sides' silence on the issue. Maybe femboys are what everyone secretly wants. Now what if we could bring them to the mainstream? Barry, get my lawyer on the phone. I have an idea.
Cat ears, some blush upon my nose, soft thighs you can use for pillows, head pats face was poggers, boy, I'm cute. But sometimes I know I'm easy to misconstrue. Yeah, I'm a fanboy, not really